We talk about this quantity approach, a horde of defenders, a horde of pass rushers. Is it perhaps, I forget the word that you said just a little bit ago, but naive to think that you can replicate what you were able to find when you brought in Chris Clemens, when you brought in Cliff Averill, when you brought in Michael Bennett? I mean, it's, I think, akin to the draft classes that you had in 2011 and in 2012, 2010, if you want to even go back that far, where you got KJ Wright. I mean, it's hard to do that twice. It's great that they were able to do it once, and I think that they deserve some benefit of the doubt that they can do it, but it, at the same time, shouldn't become something where they're rolling the dice on hoping that will happen every single year.
Yeah, but that's part of having a strength in numbers approach, right? Because I actually think it's less risky to have multiple players that aren't necessarily at the top. If you pay $20 million to Frank Clark, you are betting an awful lot of money that guy is going to be not just a dominant Pro Bowl level pass rusher, but that he's going to stay healthy, right?
Right. And by the way, he has not been a dominant Pro Bowl level player unless it's the playoffs.
He's been really good in the playoffs. And it's been a great contract for the Chiefs because it hasn't cost them anything, right? Like they were able to sign it at a time when their quarterback wasn't making market rate. But let's put that aside. It's not about whether it was good for Kansas City, but for Seattle. If you re-sign Frank Clark, you're like, okay, this guy's our stud hoss pass rusher. And we're going to depend on him an awful lot because that means we are going to have more either minimum or minimal salary guys that we piece around him. The more conservative approach is to say, we like Frank and we think he's really good, but instead of just one guy, we're going to have 3, maybe even 4 guys that we bring in. And that way, if Ziggy Ansah can't play and he's not a contributor at all, we're not sunk, right? Oh, it turned out Jadeveon Clowney, who we didn't even know was going to be available at the time we traded Frank Clark, but we ended up getting. He was a really good player for us. Or last year, Carlos Dunlap became available in the middle of the season, and that turned out to be a huge addition. Instead of betting everything on one guy in free agency, it's actually a more conservative or risk-averse approach to have a number of guys because you're not betting everything on one player who either might not be as good or might get hurt.
I'm definitely with you on that from that perspective. I'm not necessarily advocating, hey, go and get this big pass rusher. Along the way, you got to find the guy in the draft. Collier has been solid. Darrell Taylor, the Sasquatch, as you described him a little bit earlier, of the Seattle Seahawks, it does seem, even if it is Pete Carroll just being Pete Carroll, as if they are really optimistic about him to the point where they feel maybe they can rely on said hope that they have for him. And I don't think either of us find that to be a great idea. But that, I think, is the avenue they have to go if they don't bring Carlos Dunlap back.
I think of NFL contracts and draft picks as bets. I think of them as bets that you make, and you put a varying amount of resource into that bet. The risk that you're taking. A second-round pick is a pretty significant bet that you've placed on a person. You then get 4 years to watch that bet play out. And in my mind, Darrell Taylor is still very much at that. He is an undecided. The outcome has not been decided on that bet. And you can't assume it's a bust, but you can't assume it's going to be successful either. I would put Hyder kind of, he's a more secure, he's a less risky bet because you've seen his production at an NFL level. I don't think his ceiling is as high. I don't think you're going to win as much potentially as you will with Darrell Taylor. And the problem is once you get to that point where Frank Clark, at that point you're saying, okay, we're going to have problems if this doesn't work out, right? Like this is a bet where we're actually risking a significant amount with him. And Seattle's always said, well, we're going to make our bets smaller. We're going to take less risk on individual players, and we're going to believe in a strength in numbers approach. And overall, I think that's worked out. It worked out certainly incredibly well with Michael Bennett and Cliff Averill, but I think overall, Seattle, even the last 2 years, as they've cobbled together a pass rush, I would just say that, man, things come up. I think they're better off than if they had re-signed Frank Clark. Things come up that you don't know of. Things come up. Jadeveon Clowney becomes available, and the Texans pay for 40% of his salary, and you give up a third-round pick for him. Carlos Dunlap becomes available. by keeping your options open, you allow yourself to make more bets.
I'm with you there, and it could happen in August. It could happen in October. I'm just saying it's I think a little risky still at the same time to sit and wait. It might come to you. It might, and it has the last 2 years. Is that something that's so consistently going to happen for any NFL team? I mean, 3 years in a row, Danny. Imagine if they did that. They trade for Clowney in August. They trade for Dunlap in late October. There's a part of me that feels like it may be unrealistic to expect that to happen 3 years in a row.
What's the alternative? What would you rather them do?
See,
right? Because it's not this idea. It's not this ideal sort of world. Like, do you want to go pay $18 million for Shaq Barrett?
No.
Do you want to pay $10 million for Carlos Dunlap right now? Like, those are the options that you're faced with. And I think given all of those things, I like Seattle's approach because I think that the quantity does pay off over the quality because you get to make multiple bets at different points and you're not just deciding here at the moment when player acquisition is most expensive. That's what people need to remember. The first days of free agency are the least cost-effective times to improve your team. It is the most expensive time you can improve your team.
Everything is going off the shelves really quickly. It's like the run on toilet paper that for whatever reason we saw at the beginning of COVID-19, something I still can't figure out.
Has everybody just not had to buy toilet paper for a long time? Like all of those people that stocked up, are there humans out there that are like, well, we're all stocked up till 2022, man. We need no paper goods.
I wonder
some people were like buying stock in toilet paper companies. They're like, oh, this is great for business. I was like, dudes, toilet paper doesn't expire. Like, it's not like there's going to be like, oh, they bought this. This is going to be the new normal. There's a finite amount of need for that. Like, it's not like people are doing it more.
Speaking of buying stock in things that you can get at a department store, I would not be buying stock in Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Danny, I got to work and I hadn't eaten any breakfast. And I know I eat cereal like a savage by many because I don't put any milk in it. But I found some Honey Nut Cheerios. There are Cinnamon Toast Crunch options that are in our food area here at Bonneville, Seattle. And I'm not going to lie, I actually gagged when I saw the Cinnamon Toast Crunch little container.
Because it's a comedy writer, right?
Yeah.
I realized only subsequently. I'd seen the thing on Twitter. I bought a book of his, which is like Kanye West owes me $300, I think is the name of the book. I bought a book of his, and he was eating Cinnamon Toast Crunch and found shrimp tails in it. And it has produced an exchange with Cinnamon Toast Crunch, who tried to tell him that it was just sugar and cinnamon congealed into an unappetizing concoction. He's like, no, these are shrimp tails. And now Cinnamon Toast Crunch wants him to turn him over.
Right.
Which I was like, absolutely do not give it. Big Cereal is looking to cover this up.
Turn over the evidence. And the other thing that's even worse, they found rat droppings in there, and there's a theory that there were rats nesting perhaps in a giant vat of Cinnamon Toast Crunch, feeding their young and doing their business along the way.
Are the rats related to the shrimp?
Yes,
that's because of the shrimp.
That's the idea, is that the rats brought the shrimp back to their nest of Cinnamon Toast Crunch and left the shrimp there after eating it, the remnants of the shrimp shell. It's disgusting.
Yeah. Hope you're enjoying breakfast this morning.
Sorry,
15 minutes. 15 minutes.